It's fair to say that with the impending evolved jobs, almost everything is going to change for FF14's combat. At the North American Fan Fest, Square Enix showed off 4 of them, and there we got an early idea of the direction they are heading, the criteria they deem most important for the game going forward, and they quite literally outlined their goals in what they're trying to achieve by essentially reworking every job in the game. Personally, I saw flashes of a future for Final Fantasy XIV that could be incredibly exciting. They're focusing on timing, on being able to adapt the ordering of your skills to fit the requirements of whatever battle you're engaging in, and on jobs feeling well and truly unique from one another, rather than like they're just extra slots within a role. I loved that insane barred directional gap closer they added. For the first time, a movement tool that is solely based on the direction you press rather than where you're facing, and it ties into the rotation in a cool way. Dragoon is getting, in a first for the entire game, a split between the 2 flank positionals for a total of 3. Paladin is getting shield swipe back, but this time it's way cooler. It's clear that flavour and choice are the currencies Square Enix are throwing at us, but we've seen 4 jobs. What about the other 17? Today, I'm going to be theorising what we could be getting for other tank jobs come Evercold. It's a little thought experiment and not to be taken too seriously, but I encourage you at any point to leave your own ideas and hopes in the comment section, because I'd be really interested to see them. We have this fun little window of time to throw ideas at the wall where nothing is set and anything is possible, and I want to have a good time with it. Am I going to be wrong a lot? Yes. Is that okay? Absolutely. If you want to support discussions and deep dives into FF14, please do consider subscribing. So here are the 3 rules we should be working off based on the evolved jobs that already got showcased. Firstly, we should be able to condense down the core concept of a job into a single sentence and build from that. Dragoon is the melee DPS that uses powerful jumps to change the flow of battle and break the rules. Bard is the supportive singing archer. Paladin is the front line of the party, mixing melee and magic. Secondly, their rotation needs flexibility. It's clear FF14 is moving away from having strict rotations that you need to perfectly memorize, and then instead going in favour of giving you a number of options on a loop with leeway in between them, and you need to stick the individual components in the right place based on the mechanical and defensive needs of your team. Lastly, we have to look at the PvP toolkits and rip what looks like it perfectly fits directly from them. Mr. Prime developed the PvP job kits, and some of it is peak, if we're being real. We can see that he isn't shying away from just taking the good aspects, like Dragoon, with Sky High and the reworked Wormwind thrust. So, tanks are in a really interesting spot come Evercold thanks to the biggest announcement regarding their role, the addition of a new tank to make an overall spread of 5 options, and the binary splitting of tanks into 2 categories, main tank and off tank. Each type of tank have been listed as being especially useful at doing one of 2 things, either mitigating incoming damage on themselves and therefore taking aggro, or providing mitigation to the party. Paladin and the new tank are the main tanks, and Dark Knight, Gunbreaker and Warrior will all be off tanks. Now, a lot of people are nervous about this, understandably. It's a fair bit of change from the current status quo, but I'm not particularly concerned if I'm being honest, and here's why. An important distinction to make here is that just because tanks are defined as main and off tank in the game, that does not mean they necessarily need to be used in that way. Think of it as the pure and barrier healer split, with the exact same upsides and downsides. A barrier healer can provide regens and high throughput. They're not only limited to shielding and nothing else, it just has to work harder to do so, and is very occasionally limited by their cooldowns. You can clear with double barrier or double regen. You just need more coordination. It's almost certainly going to be just like that. My theory is that off tanks don't get access to the short cooldown and main tanks do, like Holy Sheltron on Paladin. These short CDs are insanely powerful for mitigation and sustain, and that could be the difference maker alone. They still need to be able to take damage, to take tank busters, and that's because of 2-target fights, swap and share busters, as well as recovery situations, and 4-man content. They are still required to be an acceptable tank, so I think that fears may be slightly over-exaggerated. We can take Paladin as an example here even, which might help to reduce those concerns. Paladin is listed as a main tank, and yet it hasn't lost any of its party support that maybe you would have expected it to lose access to with its division of responsibility. It can still cover, clemency, and it maintains access to Divine Veil, Wings, and the new proc from it that acts as an OGCD heal. If the division between tanks was going to be hard enforced in such a way, I would have expected a main tank that is not strong at mitigating allies to lose at least some of these. I think the main reason people feel wary about it is simply because we haven't seen an off-tank in action yet, and as a result it's hard to draw any real conclusions. But with the countering system that Paladin showcased, and I'm presuming the new tank has some variation of this as well, I feel like there might be some really fun active role mechanics to be dealing with on a moment-to-moment basis that reward you with damage for heads-up gameplay as an off-tank. So let's move on to Warrior first and have a little chat about them. As far as I'm concerned, Warrior's identity is fairly set in stone. It is the tank that uses Rage as the core of its attacks, with Fellcleave clearly being the most iconic of these, and it has traditionally leaned into mastery over self-healing as well. That self-healing has come in many forms, including the ability to manipulate its own maximum HP pool to better survive hits. The issue it ran into early in A Realm Reborn, which still rears its ugly head very occasionally in high-end content like Savage and Ultimate, is the simple fact that often self-healing is a far less effective mitigation than preventing the damage entirely. Self-healing won't help you survive a singular incoming attack, and thus it doesn't contribute to a tank's effective health pool when they're taking a hit, instead being relegated to dealing with the consequences of that hit afterwards. With that said, if that toolkit were extended to being something it can access for more than just the warrior themselves, we're suddenly playing an entirely different ballgame. So, this active mitigation aspect I discussed, imagine if the warrior can provide additional max health, like the tool it already has in Thrill of Battle, but this time it can be targeted on allies using a stack of a gauge that naturally replenishes. If you instead burn 2 stacks on the same target, it'll spread, much like a Scholar's deployment tactics, giving the entire party bonus maximum health for a little while. They can tie this into another special little mechanical quirk Warrior possesses as well, rebounding damage that comes onto them. Their Vengeance and Damnation have the secondary effect of rebounding a percentage of the damage they take back onto the enemy, and I think this new mitigation cooldown should do the same. Then, as a warrior, you are constantly considering, okay, I'm about to cap out on usages for this skill. Do I dump one onto the main tank for auto attacks? Do I need to save one for myself when I need to tank soon? Are there repeated raid damages coming in the near future where I'd gain more value to send 2 stacks at once to give it to the whole party? You're constantly weighing up how to mitigate well, and doing so feeds back into your DPS, much like countering does as a main tank. Aside from that though, I'd love to see a return of my favourite rage meter from the past, one of Stormblood's additions. Not the one where for some reason you could end up with 12 gauge, because it would half every time you swapped stance, and whilst cool it was a bit bizarre, but the other one, the one that enhanced your crit rate the higher gauge you had. I'm kind of sad they ever removed it in the first place, honestly. You had this really enjoyable little seesaw of management going on. You'd want to build gauge as high as possible, as consistently as you could, without ever missing a burst window or overcapping, and because you had 3 different ways to spend that gauge, there were real decisions to be made. Can we have that back, but co-opted for the evolved mode? It can be legally distinct, but I really miss that management aspect. But because off-tanks are incentivized to mitigate damage and warrior specialities are healing and raising max health, it would gain rage each time it heals itself or an ally via an action, or each time, with buffed health, they take a hit and survive. I also have a feeling that off-tanks will each have access to some method of lowering incoming damage via a debuff on foes. Some have had this in the past. For example, Dark Knight used to have a branching combo that would let them access Delirium combo. Not the same Delirium they have now from a cooldown, and if they maintained it, their foe would deal 10% less damage. I could see this getting a bespoke button based on certain conditionals, and that it would deal big damage. I don't expect Warrior's moment to moment to alter too heavily, rather for them to instead need to juggle more thought processes and shift that mentality from just themselves to the party at large. Dark Knight is a weird one. It has so much source, it's undeniable, and it is surely one of the most popular jobs in the game as a result. It has one of the strongest visual identities in the game, but I can't help but feel that most of its rotation can be boiled down to Warrior 2 with some extra OGCDs. Ironically enough, its most unique gameplay flavour is the Blackest Night, which is by far the action that draws the most criticism because people don't like the chance that it may not break. Right now, I think the argument is that it's the magic tank, and secondarily that it also has access to the Living Shadow and the effects that come with it. With Dark Knight shifting away from the main tank role and into off-tank though, I do wonder if it's a possibility for them to play into health sacrifice, which is a more mainline job flavour for the game traditionally, and also one they play into in their PvP variant. I also wonder if the physical tank and magic tank, which are grossly outdated archetypes and only have a few holdovers to this day, I hope they can be firmly left in the dust for 8.0 in favour of something far more interesting. Health sacrifice was a concept that was exceptionally difficult to pull off when all tanks needed to be equally strong at basically every task, but now that they're able to specialise, it's something that could be explored. What if, for example, the Blackest Night cost you HP to cast instead of MP when used on an ally? So if you cast it on yourself, it'll cost MP, but when used on a fellow party member, it instead uses your health as its resource, and popping it would still play into giving you direct positive feedback as damage procs to use. I wonder if, Warrior could be the regen and max health increasing tank, Dark Knight could be adept at providing shielding to allies, and Gunbreaker would instead excel at percentage mitigation. Make TBN go completely crazy. Reduce its cooldown to 5 seconds and literally let the Dark Knight spam shields on its allies, which are near enough infinite, provided it's receiving enough healing to mitigate those constant 20% losses to its health pool. In the right hands, it could feel exceptionally powerful. I'd also like Salted Earth to remain, albeit gaining an additional use. As long as you stand inside your own Salted Earth, you gain a passive regeneration, allowing you to more aggressively use your health sacrifice mechanics to protect allies and constantly proc offensive actions for the Dark Knight to use. So, you're rewarded for placement that can cover your enemies as well as you darting in amongst it. Maybe as well as TBN, there's some kind of offensive use for health as well, though maybe at that point we're straying into the territory of too many buttons, who knows. I know some people would absolutely love to see TBN removed entirely, but honestly, I think this gameplay style is interesting. It's simple to grasp, and yet it has a high ceiling that would pay dividends for the party. I'd also like to see a little more of the resource management that Heavensward Dark Knight possessed. Heavensward Dark Knight had Darkside, a damage buff that would constantly drain mana, and Dark Knights would be fighting to replenish MP to maintain it, whilst also using their mana elsewhere on other offensive cooldowns. Whilst I don't want to see Darkside return, unless you're going to give us that effect as a custom animation because it was really good, I do like the thought processes it evoked. You have your mana as this resource, and you have decisions to make on how to spend it. Each is good in different situations, and you can't just mindlessly use them all, or you drop the spinning plate of Darkside on the floor. I wonder if the Evolved mode could evoke that same feeling, and I desperately hope it can. It'd also be very interesting if Living Dead got some kind of upgrade into Eventide, which is the limit break in PvP. Maybe it could be an additional action entirely, honestly. This does scaling damage based on your health, and afterwards will make you immune, just like Living Dead does right now, and reduce you to 1 HP. It looks incredibly cool as well, and it could be a unique thematic addition. Gunbreaker has the ammo system right now, and honestly I love the core of it, but I'm also strongly of the opinion that what they do with it isn't interesting whatsoever. It's also one of the jobs that I feel has jumped the gun at this point, pardon the pun, laden with animations that are so over the top yet have no impact on your gameplay whatsoever. Yes, I do kind of mean the Reign of Beasts combo. If we run with the train of thought of Warrior being the healing tank and Dark Knight being the shielding tank, it's only reasonable that in turn Gunbreaker would be able to directly handle percentage mitigation on allies. They already have it to a small extent with Heart of Light. They could play around with the continuation system a little more, putting ammo attacks on the GCD as ranged hits with continuations, making this weird kind of inverse red mage tank that spends most of its time in melee, but can occasionally disconnect when it's blasting its ammo away. I also kind of like the idea of continuations being able to debuff enemy damage just for a few seconds, so that much like the main tank countering system, you're incentivized to send a continuation at just the right time to mitigate an incoming hit, meaning that you're stockpiling your ammo, then sending it at the right moment to be able to mitigate an attack afterwards. I wonder if they'd be willing to take the risk to give a tank positionals even. I'm really not sure what they're going to do with Gunbreaker, and I feel like either it's not going to change much, or it's going to have something completely bonkers that nobody expected. I really like the timed block and counter system for Paladin actually. I know it's legally distinct shield swipe, but it does look more interesting. When you time a block with Holy Sheltron well, you get a GCD counter strike to use, with the potency increasing based on whether you blocked it within 4 seconds of pressing the cooldown, or 8 seconds. I love that there seems to be an overall emphasis from these job changes on you timing your actions correctly to get a desired effect. Considering in Dawntrail, the speed and tempo of fights went up, having the speed and tempo of decision making in rotations do the same helps to match that pace. I also wonder if there's a cool little piece of optimization you can do here. Let's say you block a hit within the 4 seconds, use the counter immediately, and then block a second hit in the 8-second window. Do you get a second counter strike from that same cooldown? That would be nice if so. It's also confirmed from the footage that you can cover another player who is about to take damage, use Holy Sheltron, and then use that to generate a counter strike. I can see this system actually being really interesting to engage with, and I'm pretty excited to try it out in actual fights, basically. There's also a lot more freedom in how Paladin uses their ranged attacks now, seeing as Confitia combo is for all intents and purposes a 40-second cooldown with 2 stacks, thanks to its gauge. This lets you situationally slot it into your rotation based on how it lines up with the fight, which I'm a fan of, honestly. It's interesting that for Paladin, they have 2 gauges now and both of them are accrued passively. In fact, all of the jobs had at least 1 gauge that just goes up naturally over time and could be spent on something, to the point that I'm really wondering if this is going to be standardized on every job across the board. I do have one question about Paladin actually. In many jobs, if we expect the trend to continue, how does basic AoE work? Is it also a situational button? Will your basic 1-1-1-1-2-3 combo change into AoE when you're close to multiple targets? Is there instead an action that we haven't seen yet that wasn't on hotbars? How does that work, actually? I'm expecting that the former is more likely, but how exactly does that work in situations where AoE wouldn't be a gain, but there are multiple targets? What's the nuance here? Basically, I have questions and I'm really curious to see what the devs end up doing in response to them. I think that in itself is really exciting. Questions! Jobs have been a solved game for so long that I'm so excited to have questions again. Really, what this exercise has shown me more than anything is that despite me having an idea or two about 1 or 2 elements I expect them to build jobs around, and which parts they might possibly take from PvP or elsewhere and build them into job loops, really, so much is unknown. I never would have expected the Dragoon changes, for example. Not in a million years would I have predicted FF14 to pull that positional split in such a way, and it's so exciting to be shocked like that. I'm going to be wrong about a lot of this. Hell, most of it I'm going to be wrong about. And I love that. Really, I'm desperate to see and hear more, and to slowly begin to piece this new puzzle of evolved jobs together as we march onwards to Evercold.